So, true story. When I was a freshman in high school, I spent a summer helping a favorite teacher paint his house. And one day as I was working outdoors, scraping paint and doing all of that, an older guy was passing by on the sidewalk, and he stopped to engage me in casual conversation. And for some reason, I do not know why, the conversation turned to metaphysics, as will happen. So at the time, I had a lot of interest in Eastern philosophy, and I shared some things that I was learning. I don't remember exactly what, reincarnation maybe, or like non-dualism or whatever it was. And he said to me, and I remember this very well, he said, "You're a thinker, and that's good, but be careful about asking too many questions because it can lead you away from God." Needless to say, I did not take his advice. And here I am. So a couple of days ago, a friend of mine posted a video on Facebook of his daughter and her teammates competing at a middle school event called the Science Olympiad. I don't know if you're familiar with it. But this particular event was called the Battery Buggy Event. And it involves their team designing and constructing a battery-powered self-propelled vehicle that will drive as close as possible to a target at a specified distance and then stop without hitting the target. So it's a complicated engineering problem, like with a lot of variables to weigh against one another. They have to decide which materials to build the car out of. That affects things greatly. The weight, the rigidity. They have to decide what kind of engine is going to power it, which that determines what kind of battery they need. And then they have to construct and calibrate a braking system that's going to kick in at just the right time with just the right force to counteract all of these variables, right? And these are middle school kids. So in the video, my daughter's friend is kneeling on the gymnasium floor of the school that's hosting the event. And she carefully positions the metal car that they've constructed at the starting line. And she's aiming it at like a distant flag across the room. She releases the car, and it very swiftly accelerates across the gymnasium floor, traveling about 30 feet in a perfectly straight line. And then just like a few seconds, it comes to an abrupt halt, precisely 2 centimeters away from the flag. Right? It's a gold medal performance. And the proud papa explained this was the result of 5 months of careful construction, testing, and calibration. And their team is now going to nationals. And what I thought of when I saw the video were the 2 rovers that we landed on the planet Mars about 15 years ago, called Spirit and Opportunity. Now, to land a rover on Mars, a team of NASA engineers and scientists have to launch a projectile, the Mars rover, across 300 million miles of space. And they have to hit a very narrow target at the end, this little stretch of land that they're aiming for. The launching point, our Earth, is spinning at about 1,000 miles an hour. And the Earth itself is also traveling through space at about 67,000 miles per hour on a curved arc. Mars is also spinning about 540 miles per hour, and it itself is traveling through space at about 54,000 miles per hour on a curved arc. So we're shooting at a moving target from a moving base across 300 million miles of distance, and that is the easy part. Because when the rover reaches the Mars atmosphere, it is moving at 12,000 miles per hour. And it now has to survive what NASA engineers call the 6 minutes of terror. 6 minutes of terror, that sounds promising. So in 6 minutes, a combination of friction, a parachute, and retro rockets are going to bring this lander from 12,000 miles an hour to basically a dead halt. The retro rockets, the final braking system, kick in 6 seconds before impact, stopping the launcher just 4 stories off of the surface of Mars after a journey of 300 million miles. From there, airbags deploy, the rover falls the rest of the way, and it bounces about 30 times in this giant cocoon of airbags. The airbags deflate, the rover deploys. It unfolds its solar panels and begins exploring the surface of the planet. It is a ridiculously improbable undertaking. It is an almost unbelievable achievement of science and engineering, and we have done it 4 times since 1997, sending up Sojourner, Spirit, Opportunity, and the latest and greatest sole surviving Mars rover, the the aptly named curiosity. Let us have a moment of silence for opportunity, which went offline just a few months ago. So curiosity. Curiosity is the theme of our service today. And what else propels our grand venture into space and curiosity? The pure, unbridled human desire to know. And what a grand venture it has been and continues to be. We set foot on the moon 2 years before I was born. Then just in my lifetime, we've watched the sunrise from the surface of Mars. There it is. We've gotten up close and personal with the surface of Pluto, which turns out is beautiful with a distinctive heart-shaped marking on it. We've sent the Voyager spacecraft beyond the bounds of our solar system itself. And it all starts with a young person on a cold gymnasium floor launching a handmade metal contraption with practiced, calculated precision to a target on the other side. Motherboard magazine asked a bunch of scientists and academics and assorted visionary thinkers, what gives them hope for the future? What gives you hope for the future? They asked people like Tanya Harrison, a planetary scientist, director of research at Arizona State University's Space Technology and Science Initiative, and science team collaborator for the Mars Opportunity rover and the Mars 2020 mission. And she, along with many, many others, said it is the young people that give her hope. It is the young people who give her hope. She said, seeing the hope, the inspiration, the motivation of the younger generation. She said, the students who come to me asking about and wanting to be involved with humanity's future in space, it makes me feel like we'll be okay in the long run. To these things, I would add the natural curiosity of the young who have not yet learned not to ask questions, who stop to pick up rocks just to see what's underneath, who see the world with hungry eyes, as Tagore put it. In human curiosity, and in the curiosity of the young in particular, I see great cause for hope. Now, humanity has a complicated relationship to curiosity. You have all heard the phrase, curiosity killed the cat. Einstein calls curiosity holy. He says, never lose a holy curiosity. I would call it that too. But so many of our religious myths and stories going all the way back to the dawn of human culture warn us away from curiosity as much as they encourage it. The Bible in the book of Genesis and the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, maybe you've heard of it, would seem to put curiosity as the source of all human suffering, right? It's the result of our original expulsion from paradise. Because what was the apple that Adam and Eve ate from? It was the fruit of knowledge. Later in that same book of Genesis, the nations of humanity come together to build a tower to heaven, the mythical Tower of Babel, and for that they are punished by God. The tower is knocked flat and the nations are all confused with different languages, so they can never come together and cooperate in a venture like that again. Heaven forfend. The Greeks had the story of Pandora's box, right? A story about a little girl who opens a box into which all the world's evils have been placed, and they all rush out to plague humanity forever. And why did she open the box? Because she was curious. She was curious. And the Greeks have the story of Prometheus, who steals fire from the gods to give it to humanity, for which he is punished eternally. And then in more recent years, I will add, there have been a whole host of new stories, modern stories like Frankenstein and Godzilla, which express our own modern-day cultural anxiety around scientific progress, right? There's no doubt that we are a little apprehensive about curiosity as a species, and not for nothing, because curiosity gave us the atom, but it also gave us the atom bomb. Curiosity is different than wonder. Curiosity is more engaging, right? It sees that which is wondrous, and it gazes in beauty and maybe even adoration, and then it has some follow-up questions. It wants to know why and how and what for. It takes that which is awesome and it seeks to place it within human grasp. Wonder and awe are emotions that sometimes provoke us to almost take a step back, to put a little distance between ourselves and the object of reverence, but curiosity steps forward. Curiosity is a leaning in. Curiosity has an irresistible, mischievous quality to it. It is willing to go where it does not belong. It is willing to transgress sometimes. It will push the button that says, do not push, just to see what's going to happen. We can be curious about that which is repellent or terrible as much as by that which is wonderful. And so curiosity sometimes leads us to uncover truths about the world or ourselves that we would rather not face. Curiosity can be the first step to sublime poetry, but also to investigative journalism. It can blow the lid off things. And as such, curiosity can make people a little nervous. However, Unitarian Universalism is and always has been a curiosity-positive religion. It was William Ellery Channing, our original founding minister, who said, "The great end in religious instruction is not to stamp our minds upon the young, but to stir up their own. Not to make them see with our eyes, but to look inquiringly and steadily with their own." So our religion seeks to inspire in us, in our children, that holy curiosity of which Einstein spoke. Never stop questioning is the basic Unitarian Universalist approach to life. Indeed, our fourth principle both guarantees us and encourages us to a responsible search for truth and meaning. So we are on the side of the truth seekers, the question askers, the scientists, the muckrakers, and the explorers. We are on the side of the people who looked inside the atom, who gaze over the distant horizons, and who sometimes peer around corners. We were the people who published the Pentagon Papers, after all. So here are a few fun names to know when it comes to Unitarians who ask curious questions, whose sense of wonder drove them to the process of discovery. I'll just throw out a few. Cecilia Payne was a brilliant astronomer who discovered in 1925 that the stars are mostly composed of hydrogen and helium. She was the first woman to become a tenured Harvard professor, I will add, with virtually no support from Harvard itself. And she was one of the truly great 20th century scientists. Her dissertation on astronomy was called the greatest dissertation ever written in her field. And she also taught Sunday school at the First Unitarian Parish in Lexington. Clyde Tombaugh, a Unitarian, discovered Pluto. Sorry, that's not the best picture. Maybe we'll put it on Facebook, but you can Google Pluto and there it is. And there's Rachel Carson, whose love of nature combined with her investigative powers and scientific acumen led her to uncover and expose the impact of the indiscriminate spraying of DDT on natural ecosystems. And her book, Silent Spring, launched the modern environmental movement in the late 60s, which in turn shaped the values and commitments of present-day Unitarian Universalism. But curiosity, and the kind of curiosity to which our religious tradition encourages us, is about more than just the natural world. It is not just gazing over the horizon. Curiosity also encourages us to look at what is happening in our own backyard. We can be curious about the lives of our neighbors, and I don't mean not like in a peeking into windows, like peeking over fences kind of way, not going through their mail, right? We don't have to be in our neighbor's business, but we can learn our neighbors' stories. Curiosity can encourage us to see our own community more clearly, and most particularly the parts of our community where people are being poorly served or mistreated. And in this way, curiosity can expand our empathy and can lead us to engage one another with more care and more humanity. Brian Stevenson, the executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative, urges us, if we want to work for a better world, if we want to work for justice, we have to get proximate to the communities that are being mistreated. We have to lean in with curiosity. We have to learn stories of different neighborhoods and hear what people have to say about their own lives and their own experiences. So I'm taking a class at Christian Theological Seminary this spring. And as part of this class, we visited the Juvenile Detention Center here in Indianapolis. We spent the morning observing juvenile courts, listening to the various cases, and then we took a tour of the detention facility where the children are fed, schooled, counseled, encouraged, and then locked into a tiny concrete cell at the end of every night. We got to hear about the great challenges these children faced growing up and trying to function in environments marked by extreme poverty, drug addiction, homelessness, neglect, failing schools. And it all adds up to toxic stress on the mind and the body of these children. The judge observed to us, every child in here is suffering from at least a low-level trauma-induced mental health problem. The help, the support, the interventions offered, while well-intentioned, are woefully inadequate, and the entire detention process is another trauma itself, experienced by the child. And the racial dimension to the situation was obvious, an inevitable consequence of the history of segregation and redlining in our city that children today are still paying for with their lives and the promise of their future. So it was a hard experience. It was a painful experience. And we asked, what can we do? And the number one thing we were told was, tell their stories. Tell their stories of these children. You have heard it said that there are actually two cities of Indianapolis that live side by side. And I'm here to tell you that that is very real. There are not one Indianapolis, there are two. Many members of UUI who are longtime teachers or tutors or CASA advocates, you already know what I'm talking about. But there is a need for members who live in the one Indianapolis to get very curious about what life is like for members who live in the other Indianapolis, to ask questions, to hear their stories, and to demand better for all of our children. I'm going to add a plug here for Faith in Indiana, the multi-faith social justice coalition that UUI belongs to and works with. If you want to build relationships with people from all different communities in Indianapolis, if you want to hear people's stories that you maybe don't otherwise hear, and if you want to work towards changing our city from a place of real solidarity with marginalized communities, then I suggest you check it out, because Faith in Indianapolis is an incredibly diverse organization and involving all kinds of people from all walks of life and all neighborhoods. The next meeting of the UUI Faith in Indiana team is this Tuesday at 7 p.m. here at UUI, but there are lots of other ways to get involved with that institution. So our religious tradition as Unitarian Universalists calls us to both kinds of curiosity. It bids us to look at the world in wide-eyed wonder, to experience the mystery of creation with reverence and awe, and then to enter into conversation with that mystery. Not to step back, not to kneel down, but to step forward. We are called to engage the world with all of our intelligence and creativity and curiosity and ask what and why and how and what for. Because we are given the mystery of life not to stupefy us, but to challenge and delight us. We're asked to do bold and creative things with the raw materials of our living. And we are asked to teach our children and our grandchildren to do the same. And our nieces and nephews and nibblings, and the kids in our congregation, the kids who live down your block, the kids in schools in every neighborhood, not just our own. And those young minds awakened to adventure, their curiosity having been blessed, will begin to change the world in ways both big and small. They will open up realms of knowledge undreamt of by you and me. They will show us a world we did not know existed. They will invent technologies that we can scarcely now distinguish from magic. They will one day make friends with distant stars. The curiosity of the young is the hope for humanity. And our religious tradition calls us to look upon one another with that same holy curiosity. We are challenged to learn each other's stories. We are asked to be curious about that which we don't understand or which challenges our beliefs or assumptions. We're not asked to agree with one another, but what would it mean if we approached our disagreements with curiosity instead of rancor, with listening instead of defensiveness? We need more than ever to be curious about how the world looks from all manner of different perspectives. And that curiosity can lead to empathy, and empathy can lead to care, and care can foster creative solutions to our social problems. Because we are given human diversity not to vex us and divide us, but to challenge and delight us. We are asked to do bold and creative things with the raw materials of our spirit. We are asked to love our children and our grandchildren, our nieces and nephews and nibblings, the kids in our congregation, the kids who live down our block, the kids who live in every block, in every neighborhood, not just our own. And these young hearts, nurtured in loving compassion, schooled in tolerance, their curiosity about each other having been blessed, will begin to change the world in ways big and small. They will open up avenues of cooperation undreamt of by you and me. They will construct a world we did not dare believe possible. They will solve problems we had long given up on as being unsolvable, and they will one day make peace with their distant neighbors. The curiosity of the young is the hope for humanity. And so, friends, may we be committed as a religious community to model this holy curiosity in word and deed for our young people, for one another, and for the world. Blessed be, and amen.